Hey everyone, so I just saw Smile 2 and I am here to talk about it because I have things to say. Smile was definitely one of the more surprising horror films of 2022. 2022 in general was a very, very good year for horror, and Smile definitely stood out. For me, it was mostly because the trailers looked terrible. Like, I will fully admit, I went into Smile thinking that it was going to be laughably bad, and I was actually kind of excited for that, because I do really like watching a fun bad movie from time to time, especially a bad horror film. If it's done in a certain way, it can be so much fun to laugh at the movie and just have fun at how ridiculous and bad it is. But Smile, despite a fair amount of backlash, most people seemed to enjoy, and myself included. I actually do really enjoy the first Smile film, still to this day. The only thing I'll say about it now looking back is that it doesn't have much rewatch value, but on an initial viewing, I really enjoyed myself. I enjoyed the pacing, I enjoyed the tone, and I didn't feel like its obvious influences took away too much from its own things that it was doing. So, needless to say, I was excited for Smile 2. Obviously, it was written and directed once again by Parker Finn, and I saw it tonight. Now, before I really get into the weeds of my opinion of Smile 2, I do want to make one statement right off the bat. Smile 2 disappointed me. I wouldn't say it disappointed me to the point of resentfulness, but given how surprising the first film was, I had very high expectations for the sequel, especially because this film seems to be almost universally considered better than the first film in every regard, and I will fully admit there are aspects of this movie that I do think are better than the first film, but overall, as a whole piece, I definitely would not say that overall Smile 2 is better than the first film. I do think the first film is a better film, but on that point about the first film not being very rewatchable, I could see Smile 2 actually having a lot more rewatch value. About to embark on a new world tour, global pop sensation Sky Riley begins experiencing increasingly terrifying and inexplicable events. Overwhelmed by the escalating horrors and the pressures of fame, Sky is forced to face her dark past to regain control of her life before it spirals out of control. Now, as I said, this movie did let me down in certain aspects, but I don't want you guys to think that I didn't like the film. In fact, I did very much enjoy my time in that auditorium, in that screening room, watching the film. And something I will commend this film for is that it's never boring. At least for me, I never found the film boring. I was consistently intrigued to an extent, and a lot of that also has to do with the lead performance by Naomi Scott being incredible. I do think it trumps the performance from Sosie Bacon in the first film, which was already a great performance in my opinion, and there are hints of greatness in Smile 2. There are several scenes, actually. I don't even feel like I'm over-exaggerating. There are several scenes in this film that I thought were legitimately incredible. One scene in particular had me so nervous and anxious and cringing in a good way, because the scene was supposed to make you feel this really intense sense of secondhand embarrassment. And I guess in that sense, I do also have to somewhat commend the writing here, because if I didn't care about our lead character, then I wouldn't have been experiencing that in that moment. I felt nervous for her, I felt anxious for her, I felt that secondhand embarrassment, and if this was a character that I didn't care about, I wouldn't have thought any of those things. I would have just been looking at her the same way that the other characters in the scene were looking at her. This film also does have a tie to the first film, despite the widespread impression of people who haven't seen this movie being that this film has no connection to the first film outside of the concept. You know, that this is a whole new cast of characters, whole new story, whole new journey, and it definitely is those things. Don't misconstrue my words, but what I'm saying is that there is, particularly in the opening 10 minutes of the film, there is is a connection to the first film that offered a really good and shocking, like genuinely shocking payoff to where the first film left off on that sort of cliffhanger, and I really enjoyed that. It was also a great way to instantly hook me, and it did instantly get me sucked into the film, and I was like, okay, I am on board. The main character of this film being a pop singer, of course, begs the question, how's the music? It was pretty forgettable, and that's not to say that it was bad, and I want to preface this with saying I'm not talking about the composed score of the film. I'm talking about the songs that the pop star character in the film has written and is performing. Pretty forgettable, and I say it's forgettable because I saw this movie tonight, and at the time of recording this review, which is on the same night that I have seen this film, I can't recall a single melody or beat from any of the tracks here that were written for this character. As far as the gimmick that is carried over into this movie, as it is a sequel to the first film that kicked it off, I was left wanting more. And I mean that in a couple respects. One, I kind of wanted them to flesh out the lore and the actual logic and rules behind this, spoilers for the first film, Smile Demon that the first film set up pretty effectively in my opinion. What you're supposed to do with the sequel is expand on it and give the audience a sort of in, open new doors that get us excited about new possibilities that could happen in this universe, in this film specifically, but also in a Smile 3 if we ever get it. I don't think we will. I heard that Parker Finn is actually working on a Possession remake, so we'll see how that goes. Huge blind spot for me is that I have not seen the original cult classic horror film Possession, but it has been on my watch list for a long time and I'm gonna check it out. So yes, in that sense, this film did leave me wanting because it doesn't really do anything new with the lore. Really, the only new stuff that this film has to offer from the first film is the change of characters and the change of setting and scenery, which did benefit the film in many scenes. I think that this is a pretty well composed film technically. Visually, it's nice to look at. I was never rolling my eyes at any of the camera work, which is actually kind of a massive praise, honestly, because they do some crazy camera work in this movie that is at risk of coming off as cheesy or try hard, but for the most part, I think it was pretty effective. But I just wanted more out of that concept and out of that lore, not just because this is a sequel and that's what you expect from a sequel, admittedly maybe unfairly sometimes, but also because I wanted this film to set itself apart from the obvious influences that the first film had, because while I do really enjoy that first film, it is inescapable that that first movie was so inspired by films like It Follows. It was pretty much impossible to not think of It Follows while I was watching that movie, and in my opinion, It Follows is a much better film, and so that's another reason why I wanted this film to flesh out the lore more, because I think it could have served as an opportunity to actually break away from those accusations of being a ripoff when it comes to the overall concept, you know, by adding in something about the lore or the way that this demon operates that is unique. But it didn't do that, and I was left wanting there. And the other regard in which I was left wanting was the way that this film handles its horror sequences and suspense. When it comes to the actual beat-by-beat progression of the plot, if you saw the first film, I don't really think there's gonna be anything in this movie that surprises you aside from that opening scene. I'm not going to give anything major away about this film, and I'm not going to give away the ending at all, so don't worry. If you haven't seen it, you're safe with me. But what I will say is that the ending was very predictable. I mean, but before this film even came out, the second that I heard that it was going to be about a pop star, the very first thought that came to my mind was like, oh, okay, so it's probably going to end like this then. If the main character is a pop star, then it's probably going to end like this. And sure enough, it ended like that. There's not really any surprises here in regards to the major plot beats, except for a select few. and I will get into those now. Again, without giving anything away, there were many twists and turns in this film, most of which were very predictable and I did see coming from a mile away, but there was one twist that genuinely did surprise me. It genuinely did shock me, and that may not be the experience of everyone, but I know for me in the theater, I actually gasped. You know, I put my hand over my mouth. I was like, holy shit, you genuinely fooled me with that one. That was surprising. But again, with the way that it handles the majority of the scares and suspense sequences, it's the same shit that we got last time. And I know what you're thinking, Xavier, you liked it when they did it like that last time, so why now do you suddenly not like it? And again, I think this might just be a difference of perspective on horror films and horror sequels in general. For a lot of people, if they love the first film, they want all the sequels to just follow the formula of that first film very closely because it worked the first time, and the theory is that if they just stick to that formula, it will work over and over again for as long as they would like to make those movies. And I understand that perspective, and I could name a couple horror sequels that followed the formula of the first film pretty close to a T that did it well. Scream 2 comes to mind. But in regards to Smile 2, given the complete change of cast and the complete change of characters and scenery and general concept when it comes to who these characters are, I wanted them to do it differently. Because why would you change the entire cast and all the characters and all the settings and everything? Why would you change so much about the entire mise-en-scene of the film if you're not also going to use that to your advantage to change up the way that you handle the suspense and the scares? And I understand that that concern may not click with everybody, but that's just my perspective. Let me know your perspectives actually down in the comments. I would like to hear some constructive thoughts on this, but I just know from my personal experience with the film, it was something that really bugged me. Not to say that these sequences are handled badly. I mean, the whole point I'm making is that they're handled pretty much the same as they were in the first film. The issue is that I wanted something different. It just kept doing the same thing over and over and over, especially with the jump scares, and there's an overuse of them in this film. You know, at first I was like, yes, this is more of what I liked about the first film, but then it just got exhausting after a while, and it made the movie not very scary towards the latter half, because I knew exactly what to expect. Naomi Scott, a great lead performance. As I said, I think it is a worthy successor to Sosie Bacon's performance in the first film and might even be better than that performance. I did care about her character. I was there with her. I wanted her to get through this. And also, as I said, the film technically is very well presented. The cinematography is very competent. There's some really creative camera work in here. The set design, the costume design, the production design, it's all actually pretty top tier, and I found myself really enjoying those aspects of the film as well. Also, probably the most surprising aspect of this film for me was how fucking funny it was. Like, I'm not even kidding here, and I mean this in a good way, because the film has a lot of intentionally comedic, like darkly comedic moments in it that almost made it seem like this film, because the first film was very self-serious, but this film had a pretty surprising amount of it, and at first I was worried because I was like, oh, is this gonna like ditch the signature tone of the first film entirely? But it didn't. They actually balanced the humor and the horror pretty well in this one, and it made it all the more enjoyable as a result. And it also made it seem like this film was much more self-aware than the first film, because as I said, the first film was very self-serious. It very much felt like, as a film, like it was saying like, this is a serious movie and you need to take this seriously, and this is dark and this is edgy and it's psychological, and this film has those aspects in it too, but because of the added humor, I was getting a little bit of sense of poking fun at the inherent absurdity of the concept, and that made it seem much more self-aware to me, so I actually really did enjoy that aspect of the movie. So yeah, I guess in regards to my criticisms, it was good to sort of have the back half of this video be about the things that I liked, but I also want to be honest about my overall opinion, which is that Smile 2 is okay. I wouldn't call it a good or great film, but I certainly wouldn't call it a mediocre or bad film. I think it's just okay. It's a somewhat worthy sequel to the original. I do really enjoy the change of scenery, the change of setting, change of characters, but in regards to the execution of all of it, I was just left wanting more. Nevertheless, I enjoyed going to the theater to see it. I don't regret buying a ticket. I don't want those 2 hours of my life back. It is an enjoyable, fun, watchable horror film, but overall, as a whole piece, I was kind of disappointed. Those are my thoughts on Smile 2. Be sure to hit up the comment section. Let me know what you thought of the film. Do you think it's better than the original? Did you really get into it? Did you really enjoy it? Or did you hate it? Make sure you leave all those thoughts down in the comment section, and make sure you be constructive about it, be respectful about it. We're just talking about movies, man. That's all we're doing here. No reason to get nasty. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, and if you would like to go the extra mile, consider turning on those bell notifications so you get notified every time that I upload new content, and please check out my podcast, the Headspace Podcast, which is now available on all major podcast streaming platforms, most notably Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you guys so much as always for watching. I will see you in the next one, and until then, keep writing, keep shooting, and keep editing.